The woman who walked out of prison and vanished forever, Judy Lynn Hayman, The Disappearing Act. Before you watch, hit subscribe, because in this world, some people don't just break the law, they erase themselves completely. It began on a gray February morning in 1977. The cold Michigan air bit through the iron bars of the Women's Correctional Facility in Ypsilanti. Inside cell block C, inmate Judy Lynn Hayman, 23 years old, sat on her narrow bunk, staring at a handwritten note folded neatly in her lap. The letter wasn't from family, not from a friend, it was a plan. A plan she'd been perfecting for weeks. Judy wasn't the type anyone pegged for an escape artist. She wasn't violent or defiant, her crime had been minor, possession of stolen property. Her sentence, just 18 months. Yet, 8 months into it, she'd had enough. Enough of the smell of bleach and metal, enough of the strip searches, enough of the eyes watching her every move. She told herself she was smarter than the walls that held her. Guards described her as polite, quiet, the kind who could disappear into the background. And that's exactly what she did. One cold morning, when inmates were shuffling between work duty and breakfast, Judy pulled off one of the most understated escapes in Michigan history. She simply walked away. She had borrowed a set of civilian clothes from a laundry detail, tucked her cropped hair under a hat, and slipped out through an unlocked side door near the infirmary. No alarms. No confrontation. Just the crunch of her shoes on the snow as she walked calmly toward freedom. By the time guards realized she was missing, hours had passed. And Judy Hayman had already vanished into the world beyond the prison fence. Police swarmed the surrounding towns. Posters went up, her face printed beneath the word escaped in bold black letters. Roadblocks were set. But there was nothing. No car thefts, no sightings, no trace. It was as if she'd evaporated. The public moved on. But inside the Michigan Department of Corrections, her name became a quiet legend, a ghost story told to new recruits. You ever hear about the woman who just walked out and never came back? In the weeks that followed, investigators traced her old life, friends, jobs, boyfriends. Nothing. Judy Lynn Hayman had effectively ceased to exist. But someone did notice when a woman fitting her description applied for an apartment across the country under a new name, Jamie Lewis. She looked different, hair longer, darker, a slight change in her posture. Over the next few years, Jamie built an ordinary life in California. A small apartment, a retail job, neighbors who waved politely but didn't pry. She paid bills on time, volunteered locally, and never drew attention. It was the perfect disguise, not through masks or fake passports, but through normalcy. Judy had transformed from fugitive to forgettable. Decades passed. Records were digitized, names scanned into national databases, fingerprints uploaded. But Judy's files sat in an old cabinet, unconnected, unimportant. Until 2014. A Michigan corrections officer reviewing cold fugitive cases stumbled across her name. A clerical note caught his eye, believed deceased. Something about it didn't sit right. He reopened the file, looked at her prison photo, young, sharp eyes, a wary half-smile, and ran it through the FBI's updated facial recognition system. Moments later, the computer flagged a match, a 60-year-old woman living in San Diego County, California. Police moved quietly, checking property records, driver's license data, and utility bills. The name matched. The face matched. And yet, no one could believe it. How could a fugitive live undetected for nearly 4 decades, paying taxes, renewing licenses, smiling in yearly ID photos? It was almost too ordinary to be criminal. Officers arrived at a quiet suburban street lined with palm trees and pastel houses. Neighbors peeked through curtains as unmarked cars rolled in. The woman who answered the door looked confused but calm. Gray hair, glasses, a soft smile. When asked her name, she hesitated, just for a second. Jamie Lewis, she said. But the detective's eyes didn't move. He pulled out a faded mugshot, a face from 1977. The same eyes stared back, only older. He asked again, softer this time. Are you sure about that name? The woman's hand trembled. A pause stretched between them, almost 4 decades long. Finally, she sighed, eyes lowering to the floor. My name was Judy Hayman. And just like that, the ghost of Michigan's most mysterious fugitive stepped back into the light. But what police found inside her house raised new questions, far more than they could answer. Because hidden in her drawers and photo albums wasn't just the story of survival. It hinted at why she ran, and who may have helped her disappear, the double life. When the officers entered the quiet San Diego home, they expected to find a scared woman hiding from her past, maybe fake IDs, maybe cash, maybe signs of a desperate fugitive. What they found instead was unsettling in a different way, a normal, almost painfully ordinary life frozen in time. The house smelled faintly of lavender and old furniture polish. Framed photos lined the hallway, smiling family members, a young boy in a graduation gown, an old dog asleep by a Christmas tree. There were utility bills stacked neatly on the counter, grocery lists written in tidy cursive, and a book of recipes open on the kitchen table. Detectives searched the drawers carefully, and that's when they saw it, a folder tucked behind a stack of tax records. Inside were 2 birth certificates, one Michigan, one California. 2 lives, 2 histories, 1 woman. Neighbors would later tell reporters they couldn't believe it. She was the sweetest person, one woman said. She brought casseroles to potlucks and volunteered at the library. She wasn't that type. But she was exactly that type, not a hardened criminal, but a quiet one. The kind who disappeared in plain sight. Back in Michigan, investigators were stunned. The corrections department called her case a statistical miracle. Escapes happen, but not escapes that last 37 years. How did no one notice? How did Judy Lynn Hayman, a name on a wanted list, become Jamie Lewis, a mother, an employee, a citizen? The answer was buried in small details. Judy had chosen California not just for its distance, but for its looseness. The late 1970s were a time before digital trails. Birth certificates were paper, IDs handwritten. If you moved often enough, paid cash, stayed polite, no one asked questions. She'd found work under the table first, cleaning houses, waiting tables, caring for the elderly. By the 1980s, she had built enough of a local reputation to get hired officially. Her employer remembered her as kind, reliable, quiet, like she was grateful for everything. That gratitude, investigators realized, was the face of fear. She'd never told anyone the truth, not her coworkers, not her friends, not even her son, who thought his mother had simply been a single parent starting fresh. But hidden deep in a storage box, detectives found something that revealed the weight she'd carried all those years, a prison uniform patch, carefully folded and wrapped in a napkin. On the back, in her handwriting, was a single word. Sorry. When she was brought to the San Diego County Sheriff's Office, Judy didn't resist. No protests, no tears. Just a quiet resignation. I always knew this day would come, she told the officer escorting her. I just didn't think I'd live long enough to see it. In Michigan, the old case file was reopened. Faded photos, typewritten reports, yellowing fingerprints, it all came back to life. Reporters swarmed the small town where she'd first been arrested. The headline read, "Fugitive found after 37 years, living a perfectly normal life." But behind the headlines, the detectives were bothered by something. How had she escaped so easily back then? How did no one notice her absence for hours? Who left that side door unlocked near the infirmary? An internal report from 1977, long buried in archives, mentioned a guard who was disciplined for procedural negligence. His name wasn't released, but rumor had it he'd known Judy, friendly, sympathetic. Too sympathetic. Had someone helped her walk away? When questioned, Judy didn't confirm it, but she didn't deny it either. She only said, "I wasn't supposed to make it that far. But someone turned away when I needed it." Investigators were divided. Was it love, guilt, or pity that made someone risk everything for her? No one knew. The guard in question had died years earlier, taking the secret with him. As for Judy, extradition to Michigan loomed. News cameras captured her being led out of the San Diego precinct, small, gray-haired, her hands cuffed loosely in front of her. But what stood out wasn't fear. It was the calm on her face, the same calm she must have worn when she walked out of prison nearly 4 decades earlier. When she arrived in Michigan, she was met with silence. No crowds, no press, just the same cold walls she'd escaped long ago. But something about her return felt wrong. There was no satisfaction for the system that had lost her. No triumph for the officers who'd found her. The warden himself admitted. She wasn't violent. She wasn't dangerous. She just didn't want to be here. That truth complicated everything. Because now, decades later, the state had to decide what justice looks like when the fugitive isn't a threat, but a ghost of her younger self. Days after her return, Judy sat in a small interview room, her wrists resting on the table. The detective leaned forward and asked, "Why did you do it? You only had 10 months left." She looked up with tired eyes and said quietly, "Because prison wasn't just a place. It was a reminder. And I couldn't live the rest of my life as that person." She'd been free longer than she'd ever been confined. But freedom, it seemed, had come with a different kind of sentence, the endless weight of pretending. What investigators found next, hidden in her California records, would reveal how deep that lie really went, and how her new life wasn't as untouched as she'd hoped, the ghost of 2 lives. The truth began to unravel slowly, like the life Judy had so carefully stitched together. When Michigan investigators started digging into her new identity, they discovered that Judy, or Jamie Lewis, as she'd been known, had not only built a false name but a full history. Social security records, a driver's license, employment history, even tax filings. Everything matched perfectly, but none of it belonged to her. The real Jamie Lewis had died in 1976, 1 year before Judy's escape. The death certificate was filed quietly in another state, never digitized until years later. Judy must have found it through an obituary or a contact. It wasn't clear. What was clear was how precise she'd been. She didn't steal an identity that was alive. She borrowed one that had already been buried. To the world, Jamie Lewis had lived a quiet, uneventful life. But to the state of Michigan, Judy Hayman had risen from the dead. The media couldn't get enough of it. The woman who outsmarted the system for 37 years. Prison escapee lived a perfect life in suburbia. TV crews gathered outside her former California neighborhood. Her old co-workers were stunned. She was so gentle, one said. She used to talk about second chances. I guess now I know what she meant. But for Judy, the fairy tale was ending. In court, she faced the same justice system she'd fled nearly 4 decades earlier. The prosecutor's voice was sharp, but the jury's eyes softened as they watched her, frail, trembling, no longer the young woman in the mugshot. She wasn't dangerous anymore, she was tired. Her attorney argued that she had lived an honest life for decades, that she had rehabilitated herself in a way prison never could. This isn't the story of a fugitive, he said. It's the story of a woman who reformed in exile. And for once, even the court seemed unsure. During questioning, a small but devastating truth came out. The detective asked her one final time, "Was there someone who helped you back then?" Judy looked down, twisting her fingers together. "He was kind to me," she said. "He told me not to ruin my life over one mistake. And then, he didn't stop me when I walked away." They knew who she meant, the guard from 1977 who'd been dismissed quietly. His name never entered the official record. He died in 1992. The department never pursued it further. But his ghost lingered over the entire case, the unspoken accomplice to her freedom. After months of deliberation, Michigan offered her a deal. Because of her age and good behavior, she wouldn't be sent back to full prison. Instead, she'd serve a short term in county custody, a symbolic punishment for decades of peace. Reporters expected a tearful apology. Instead, Judy said something that would haunt the broadcast. "I wasn't trying to fool anyone," she told the cameras. "I was trying to survive being forgotten." Her words hit harder than the crime itself. She wasn't a mastermind or a monster, she was a reflection of what happens when someone disappears and the world stops looking. 2 weeks later, she was released quietly from custody. She returned to California under supervision, but by then her home was gone, sold, her belongings boxed away. Her neighbors never saw her again. Some say she moved north to live with her son under a new name. Others say she lived her last years in a nursing home, never speaking of her past again. No one knows for sure. The records fade out like static, the same way she once did. What remained was the lesson her story carried. For 37 years, Judy Lynn Hayman lived between two worlds, the one that punished her and the one that unknowingly forgave her. She proved something no system wants to admit, that a person can disappear, start over, and become someone else entirely, if they're willing to give up their name. In 2014, when the final report was filed, the officer who'd found her wrote one last note in the case file. Subject located alive after 37 years. Case closed. Escape unsolved. It was more than paperwork. It was the acknowledgement that even after everything, prison, freedom, exposure, Judy Hayman had still won. Because in the end, the system caught a name, not a person. And maybe that's why, somewhere in a quiet California town, an elderly woman could still look in the mirror, whisper a name no one else remembered, and smile. My name was Judy Lynn Hayman. And I walked away. If you think this story was unbelievable, wait until you hear the next one. Because some fugitives don't just run, they build entire lives in plain sight. Hit subscribe, before the next ghost disappears.